The crimson alert lights bathed the emergency command center in an eerie glow as Ambassador Keel floated in his containment tank, watching the death of his world unfold on the massive holographic displays. Outside the reinforced dome, the ancient oceans of Kepler 442b churned violently, their peaceful blue depths now twisted into unnatural spirals by invisible gravitational forces that were tearing the planet apart from within. "Status report," Keel demanded, his voice bubbling through the translation device mounted on his tank. His silver-scale body trembled as another seismic wave shook the underwater bunker, causing the emergency lights to flicker ominously. Captain Noller, his military aide, swam closer to the command console, her fins working frantically to maintain position against the artificial currents. "The stellar collapse is accelerating. Ambassador, our scientists estimate we have perhaps 7 rotations before the planet's core loses structural integrity completely. 7 days. 7 days for 2 million souls." Keel's tentacles writhed with barely controlled panic. Through the transparent aluminum walls, he could see the evacuation transports struggling against the increasingly violent storms. Their sleek, bioorganic vessels, perfectly designed for peaceful exploration and trade, were never meant to handle the raw fury of a dying world. Already, 3 ships had been lost to the gravitational anomalies, taking nearly 5,000 Zephyrians with them into the crushing depths. "What about the distress beacon?" he asked, though he already dreaded the answer. Noller's chromatophers shifted to deep purple, the color of despair among their people, broadcasting on all standard frequencies for 3 full cycles now. "The signal has reached every major system within 50 light-years. And the responses..." The younger Zephyrian skin patterns flickered with nervous energy. "The Galactic Council acknowledged receipt 12 hours ago. They've called an emergency session to discuss potential rescue operations." Keel's gills fluttered violently, expelling clouds of agitated water. "Discuss? While our children drown in the depths." His voice rose to a pitch that made the translator crackle with static. "What about the Centaurian Empire? They have the largest fleet in this sector." "Admiral Zex Prime sent a formal response an hour ago," Noller reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "He says the gravitational distortions make any rescue attempt too dangerous for their crews. They are offering to accept refugees if we can somehow transport them to neutral space." "Refugees," Keel spat, the word tasting bitter even through the translation matrix. "And I suppose they expect us to swim through the vacuum of space." Another violent tremor shook the command center, and several of the holographic displays flickered and died. Emergency protocols kicked in, bathing the chamber in harsh red emergency lighting. Through the chaos, Noller continued her grim report. "The Vegan Alliance claims they lack sufficient resources for a large-scale evacuation. The Rigel Confederation is 3 weeks away at maximum hyperspace. The crystalline entities won't even acknowledge our transmissions because we're carbon-based life forms." Each name on the list felt like another nail in their collective coffin. These were the great civilizations of the galaxy, species that had transcended the primitive struggles of planetary survival and achieved interstellar harmony. Yet when faced with the desperate cries of a dying world, they responded with bureaucracy, excuses, and cold calculations of profit versus loss. "What about the traders? The independent merchant guilds?" Keel asked, grasping at increasingly thin strands of hope. "The few who responded want payment in advance. Enough refined quantum crystals to power a small moon. Even if we liquidated our entire planetary treasury, we couldn't afford transport for more than 50,000 individuals." Keel watched helplessly as another evacuation transport spiraled out of control on the display, its bioluminescent hull flickering weakly before disappearing into the crushing darkness of the deep trenches. The pilot's final transmission echoed through the command center. "Tell my spawn cluster I tried to be brave." The ambassador's tentacles coiled tightly around the support struts of his tank. 3 cycles of broadcasting their desperate plea across the stars, and this was the galaxy's response. The great and mighty civilizations that preached unity and cooperation were content to let 2 million souls perish rather than risk their precious ships or spend their carefully hoarded resources. But unknown to the dying Zephyrians, their signal had traveled farther than any of them had dared to hope. At the very edge of their transmission range, past the boundaries of what the Galactic Council considered civilized space, their desperate plea had been intercepted by monitoring stations belonging to a species most galactic citizens spoke of only in whispered warnings. The humans of Sol 3 had heard their call. On a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, in a system that had been quarantined for the safety of more advanced civilizations, beings who had learned to fight nature itself for every day of their existence were about to make a decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The bridge of the UES Defiant hummed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Robert Mitchell stood before the massive holographic display, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The alien distress signal played for the third time, its desperate tones cutting through the background noise of the ship's systems like a knife through steel. Around him, his bridge crew maintained their post with a disciplined calm that had made the Sol Defense Fleet legendary throughout human space. "Computer, enhance the transmission and run it through the xenolinguistics database," Mitchell commanded, his deep voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 30 years protecting humanity from the unknown dangers of deep space. Lieutenant Kelly Barnes, the ship's communications specialist, looked up from her station with wide eyes. "So, the translation matrix is showing 2.3 million individual life signs on that planet. The gravitational readings are off the charts. Whatever's happening to their world, it's tearing the place apart." Mitchell studied the data streaming across his personal tablet, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the implications. The Zephyrian homeworld wasn't just facing a natural disaster, it was experiencing complete planetary collapse. Every human in the bridge understood what that meant. They had all grown up hearing stories of Earth's own close calls, the asteroid impacts, the supervolcanic eruptions, the ice ages that had nearly wiped out their ancestors multiple times throughout history. Commander Tyler Harrison, Mitchell called to his second-in-command, a young officer whose brilliant tactical mind had earned him rapid promotion through the ranks. How long would it take to mobilize Task Force 7? Tyler's fingers danced across his holographic interface, pulling up fleet deployment schedules and hyperspace navigation charts. 6 hours for full mobilization. Sigh. But Admiral, we haven't received authorization from Earth Command for any rescue operations beyond the Sol system. The Galactic Council has specific treaties about. The Galactic Council can debate treaty violations after we save those people. Mitchell interrupted, his tone carrying the steel that had earned him respect from both his crew and his enemies. "Lisa, get me a priority channel to President Harrison on Earth. Route it through the quantum comm array." Communications Officer Lisa Carter nodded, her hands flying over the quantum communication console. The bridge fell silent except for the subtle hum of the ship's faster-than-light communication system, establishing a connection across the vast distances of space. Within moments, the familiar voice of Earth's president crackled through the speakers. "Admiral Mitchell, I assume this is about the alien distress signal our monitoring stations picked up." "Yes, Mr. President. We have 2.3 million sentient beings facing extinction. Their planet is being torn apart by some kind of stellar phenomenon. The other galactic civilizations are sitting on their hands, running cost-benefit analyses while people die." A pause filled the channel, broken only by the soft whisper of quantum static. On the bridge, every crew member held their breath. They had all joined the Sol Defense Fleet for moments exactly like this, when humanity would be called upon to make the choice between safety and doing what was right. "Admiral, what are you asking for?" Mitchell straightened his shoulders, looking out at the stars beyond the bridge's transparent aluminum windows. "Full authorization for Operation Guardian Angel. Task Force 7, including the carrier groups and all support vessels. We go in, we get those people out, we bring them to safety. No politics, no treaties, no calculations about what we might gain or lose. The risks? Unknown stellar phenomenon, gravitational anomalies that could crush our ships, potential first contact with a hostile alien species, possible violation of 17 different galactic peace accords." Mitchell rattled off without hesitation. "Standard Tuesday, in other words." President Harrison's laughter echoed through the bridge speakers. "Admiral, I didn't elect you to the Defense Council because you played it safe. You have full authorization. Save those people and bring our boys and girls home safely." "Understood, sir." Mitchell out. The moment the channel closed, the bridge erupted into control chaos. Tyler was already coordinating with the other ships in the task force, his voice steady as he issued rapid-fire commands. "All ships, this is command. Operation Guardian Angel is authorized. Begin immediate preparation for hyperspace jump to Kepler 442b. full combat readiness, maximum humanitarian supplies. Lisa coordinated with the fleet's logistics officers, ensuring that the massive cargo holds of the support vessels were loaded with emergency medical supplies, temporary habitation modules, and enough food and water to sustain millions of refugees during the journey to safety. Across the fleet, thousands of human personnel worked with the practiced efficiency of a species that had learned to respond to disasters quickly and decisively. Marines checked their equipment, engineers ran final diagnostics on the hyperspace drives, medical teams prepared emergency treatment facilities, and pilots ran through combat scenarios that might be needed if the rescue operation encountered hostile forces. So, Tyler reported, all ships report ready for hyperspace jump. The other galactic civilizations have been debating this crisis for 3 days. We're ready to deploy in 4 hours. Admiral Mitchell nodded, watching as the last of the supply shuttles docked with the fleet's carriers. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet determination, each person understanding that they were about to undertake a mission that would define not just their own careers, but humanity's place in the galaxy. Take us to hyperspace, Commander. Let's show the galaxy what happens when someone actually needs help and humanity is listening. The stars elongated into brilliant streaks of light as the human fleet jumped toward a dying world and 2 million souls who had no idea that salvation was coming from the species the galaxy feared most. The hyperspace window tore open like a wound in reality, and the human fleet materialized at the edge of a cosmic nightmare. Admiral Robert Mitchell gripped the command rail of the UES Defiant as the sensor readings flooded across the bridge displays, each number more impossible than the last. "Mother of God!" whispered pilot Danny Walsh from his station, his face pale as he stared at the main viewport. "Sir, are we looking at what I think we're looking at?" Before them, Kepler 442b writhed in its death agonies. The planet's beautiful blue oceans, once peaceful and serene, now churned in massive whirlpools that stretched from pole to pole. Gravitational waves from the collapsed stellar remnant, invisible but devastatingly powerful, rippled through space like the breath of some cosmic monster, warping reality itself around the dying world. "Sensors are going crazy, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Kelly Barnes, her voice tight with concentration. "The gravitational distortions are off every scale we have. Whatever's causing this, it's pulling the planet apart from the inside out." Mitchell watched in grim fascination as entire continents buckled and split, massive chunks of the planet's crust spinning away into space like leaves in a hurricane. The sight would have driven most species to retreat immediately, declaring the situation hopeless. But humans had spent millions of years learning to stare death in the face and spit in its eye. "Tyler, deploy the fleet in rescue formation. I want our heaviest ships closest to the gravity well. Use the destroyers as anchors and position the transports in their shadows." Commander Tyler Harrison nodded sharply, his hands flying over the tactical display. "All ships, this is Fleet Command. Assume rescue formation Delta 7. Heavy cruisers, move to forward positions. Transports, maintain safe distance until we establish secure corridors." As the human ships began their complex dance through the gravitational chaos, something remarkable became visible. Unlike the sleek, elegant vessels favored by most galactic civilizations, human ships looked like they had been built for war against the universe itself. Their hulls were thick and angular, reinforced with layers of ablative armor and emergency shielding. Where other species built ships that looked like art, humans built ships that looked like they could ram through a planet and keep flying. Deep beneath the churning oceans of Kepler 442b, Ambassador Keel pressed his face against the observation window of the emergency bunker, watching in disbelief as massive shapes descended through the storm. The human vessels moved through gravitational anomalies that had already destroyed several Zephyrian evacuation craft, their angular hulls glowing with the discharge of their deflector shields. "What manner of beings are these?" Captain Nola gasped, her chromatophers shifting to colors that indicated both awe and terror. "Their ships are moving through distortions that would tear our vessels apart." Keel's tentacles trembled as he watched one of the human destroyers actually flying backwards, using its main engines to fight against a gravitational wave that was trying to drag it toward the planet's surface. The ship's hull was glowing cherry red from the stress, but it held position, creating a stable pocket of space where smaller craft could operate safely. "Incoming transmission," announced the bunker's communication officer, his voice barely audible above the grinding noise of the planet's death throes. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the bridge of an alien vessel unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Where their own ships were grown from living coral and shaped by centuries of bioengineering, this craft looked like it had been forged in the heart of a star. Standing in the center of the bridge was a being that looked almost primitive compared to the elegant, graceful forms of most galactic species. Admiral Mitchell stepped forward, his scarred face and graying hair speaking of decades spent in the void between stars. When he spoke, his words carried a weight that made the translators struggle to find equivalent concepts in the Zephyrian language. "This is Admiral Mitchell of the Sol Defense Fleet. We receive your distress call. We're here to get you out. All of you." Ambassador Keel's gills fluttered wildly as the translation finished. The concept the human had expressed, the casual certainty with which he had said, "all of you," contained implications that his species' language could barely handle. No rational being would attempt to evacuate 2 million individuals from a planet in the process of tearing itself apart. The logistics alone were impossible, the risks incalculable. "Admiral," Keel managed to say, his voice trembling, "surely you understand the scope of what you're suggesting. Our population centers are scattered across 12 different ocean depths. The gravitational distortions make surface approach extremely dangerous. Your own ships will do what they were built to do," Mitchell interrupted, his tone carrying absolute confidence. "Our engineers designed these vessels to operate in conditions that would kill most species. We've evacuated populations from worlds hit by gamma-ray bursts, pulled survivors from planets being consumed by their own suns, and relocated entire civilizations ahead of asteroid impacts. This isn't our first disaster, Ambassador. It won't be our last." On the surface, human landing craft began their descent through the chaos, their pilots navigating by instinct and reflexes honed by growing up in a world that had tried to kill their ancestors for millions of years. As they broke through the storm-tossed atmosphere, the Zephyrians below could only watch in amazement as beings from a quarantined system began the impossible task of snatching 2 million souls from the jaws of extinction. The galaxy's dangerous primitives had arrived, and they had come to save everyone. Lieutenant Jake Wilson gripped the controls of Transport Bravo 7 as another gravitational wave slammed into his ship like an invisible freight train. The hull groaned under the stress, metal plates flexing in ways they were never designed to handle, but the reinforced human engineering held firm. Through the viewport, he could see the Hell's Cape that Kepler 442b had become, its surface torn apart by forces that defied comprehension. "Transport 7, your radiation readings are spiking into the red zone," crackled the voice of Captain Rachel Stone from a command cruiser. "That storm front is putting out enough gamma radiation to cook most species in minutes." Jake banked hard to port, feeling the artificial gravity system strain to compensate as he threaded his transport through a gap between two massive gravitational distortions. Behind him, the cargo bay was packed with nearly 1,500 Zephyrian refugees, their silvery forms huddled in specially designed water-filled transport pods that the human engineers had fabricated in record time. "Copy that. Command," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the ship bucking like an angry bronco. "Nothing I haven't seen in a Cat 5 hurricane back on Earth. These Zephyrians are tougher than they look too. The ones we picked up from the deep-sea colonies have been helping organize the others. Makes the job easier when your passengers aren't panicking." The transport shuddered as another gravity wave tried to tear it apart, but Jake had grown up flying through the atmospheric chaos of Earth's storm systems. His hands, evolved over millions of years to grip tools and weapons on humanity's hostile homeworld, held the controls with practiced ease. Where other species needed computers and automated systems to handle the stress, humans could simply feel their way through the chaos. "Jake, you've got 3 more gravity wells forming directly ahead," warned the ship's AI. "Recommend immediate course correction to avoid." "I see them," Jake interrupted, already adjusting his trajectory. He dug beneath the invisible distortions, using his ship's momentum to slingshot around a particularly nasty gravitational anomaly that would have crushed a more delicate vessel. Sometimes you have to dance with a storm instead of fighting it. 3 decks below in the medical bay, Dr. Helen Brooks worked frantically over an alien patient whose physiology was unlike anything in human medical databases. The Zephyrian female had been injured during the evacuation from one of the deep-sea cities, her gill structures damaged by debris from a collapsing habitat dome. Her respiratory system is completely different from ours, Helen muttered to herself, studying the bioscanner readings. But the basic principles are the same. Oxygen exchange, blood circulation, neural pathways. It's all just variations on the same theme. Her medical training had prepared her for treating humans in impossible conditions, battlefield medicine where she had to improvise with whatever materials were available. Now, faced with an entirely alien biology, that same adaptability kicked in. She modified a human breathing apparatus to work with the Zephyrian's gill structures, using techniques she had learned treating drowning victims back on Earth. Doctor, we have 17 more critical cases coming up from Transport 4, called Nurse Tom Bradley, rushing past with an armload of improvised medical supplies. Their city took a direct hit from a gravity wave, multiple crush injuries, and respiratory trauma. Helen nodded, already moving to prepare the next surgical station. Around her, the medical bay hummed with controlled chaos as human medics applied centuries of battlefield medicine to entirely alien physiology. They worked with the same calm efficiency they had learned treating hurricane victims, earthquake survivors, and radiation poisoning cases from Earth's numerous natural disasters. On the bridge of Transport 12, pilot Lisa Carter fought to maintain control as her ship was caught in the edge of a gravitational vortex. The transport was heavily loaded with refugees from the planetary capital, nearly 2,000 Zephyrians packed into every available space. Through her headset, she could hear the voices of dozens of other human pilots, all facing similar impossible conditions, all refusing to give up. This is Transport 15. Just cleared the northern continent. Picked up the last group from the Deep-Sea Research Station. That's everybody from Grid 7. Transport 3 here. Fighting some nasty shear forces, but we're loaded with 1,200 from the industrial complex. These folks built some impressive underwater cities. Shame to see them go. Transport 9 reporting successful extraction from the abyssal colonies. The Zephyrians down there had never seen sunlight before. Should have seen their faces when they realized we were taking them to the surface for the first time in their lives. As the fourth day dawned over the dying world, the last human transport fought its way clear of the atmosphere just as Kepler 442b finally reached its breaking point. The planet split apart like a broken egg, its molten core exposed to space as gravitational forces tore away the last remnants of its crust. Jake Wilson, now piloting the final evacuation run, watched the planet's death in his rear-view display. Behind him, 2,000 Zephyrian refugees pressed against the observation windows, watching their world die. But they were alive, and that was what mattered. All transports clear and accounted for, reported Captain Stone over the fleet communication channel. 2.3 million souls extracted successfully. No human casualties. The Deathworlders have done what the galaxy said was impossible. In the depths of space, the human fleet began its journey towards safety, carrying with them the entire surviving population of a civilization that had learned something important about the species from Sol 3. When humans say they are coming to help, they mean everyone. Ambassador Keel floated in the specially constructed aquatic chamber aboard the UES Defiant, his silvery form drifting near the transparent aluminum viewing port. Through it, he could see the remnants of his home world scattered across space like broken glass, the debris field that had once been Kepler 442b slowly spreading into the cosmic void. The sight should have filled him with despair, but instead, he felt something he had never experienced before while looking upon destruction: hope. Admiral Robert Mitchell stood beside the aquatic tank, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the alien ambassador process the loss of his world. The human's face bore the kind of calm acceptance that came from a species that had learned to find meaning in the act of saving lives, regardless of the cost. "Admiral," Keel said through the translation matrix, his voice carrying undertones that the human device struggled to interpret. "I must ask you something that my people cannot understand. Why did you come? Your species gains nothing from this rescue. No territory, no resources, no political advantage. By all rational calculations, you should have ignored our distress call like everyone else." Mitchell turned slightly, his gray eyes meeting the alien's large, dark ones. "You needed help," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "But the cost?" Keel pressed, his tentacles writhing with confusion. "The risk to your ships, your crews, your resources. The potential diplomatic complications with the Galactic Council. Some of your vessels sustained significant damage fighting through the gravitational storms. Your people could have died." The Admiral shrugged, a gesture that the translator couldn't quite capture in Zephyrian terms. "Sometimes that's just what you do. When someone's drowning, you don't stop to calculate the cost of the life preserver. You throw it and ask questions later." Keel's chromatophers shifted to colors that indicated deep bewilderment. "But we are strangers to you. Aliens. Our species had never even made contact before this crisis." "Doesn't matter," Mitchell replied, watching as a human fleet began its formation for the jump to hyperspace. 2,000,000 lives are 2,000,000 lives, regardless of what species they belong to. My grandmother used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they treat their friends, but how they treat strangers who have nothing to offer them in return. 3 days later, the human fleet materialized in orbit around Kepler Prime, a water world in the Zephyrian colonial territories that had been hastily prepared to receive the refugees. The planet's existing population of 50,000 colonists had worked around the clock to prepare temporary habitats in the vast ocean depths, expanding their cities to accommodate their displaced brethren. As a massive human transport began their careful descent through the atmosphere, releasing specialized drop pods filled with Zephyrian refugees into the waiting ocean, something unprecedented happened. The human fleet, having completed their mission, simply left. No territorial claims were filed. No payment was demanded. No political treaties were signed. Admiral Mitchell sent a brief message to the planet's surface. "Good luck rebuilding. If you need anything else, you know how to reach us." The recordings of the rescue operation spread across the galaxy like wildfire, transmitted through the quantum communication networks that connected civilized space. In the crystal spires of the Altarian Collective, beings of pure energy watched the footage in stunned silence, unable to comprehend why a species would risk so much for strangers. On the gas giant cities of the Jovian Federation, the insectoid inhabitants clicked their mandibles in confusion as they observed human crews working 18-hour shifts to fabricate emergency habitats for alien refugees. Their hive mind mentality could understand protecting one's own colony, but this level of sacrifice for outsiders defied all logical parameters. The reptilian senators of the Draconian Empire called emergency sessions to analyze the human behavior, convinced it must be some elaborate deception or long-term strategic play. When their intelligence analysts concluded that the humans had acted purely out of compassion, several senators required medical attention for stress-induced molting. Within weeks, the first new distress calls began reaching human space. The crystalline entities, who had previously refused to acknowledge carbon-based life forms, transmitted a desperate plea when their homeworld was threatened by a rogue black hole. The message was brief: request assistance from Sol 3 humans. Others have refused aid. The Centaurian Empire, which had deemed the Zephyrian rescue too dangerous, found themselves facing a plague outbreak on their outer colonies. Their own medical ships were deemed too valuable to risk in contaminated zones. Their distress call to human space was reluctantly transmitted, seeking assistance from species with tolerance for dangerous conditions. Even the proud Vegan Alliance, who had claimed insufficient resources to help the Zephyrians, sent a coded transmission to Earth when their trade routes were disrupted by spatial pirates. They had learned that human ships, built like mobile fortresses, were uniquely suited to fighting through hostile territory. Admiral Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Defiant, reading the growing list of requests for assistance from species that had spent decades treating humanity as dangerous primitives. Commander Tyler Harrison approached with the latest batch of distress signals. "Sir, we're receiving an average of 12 requests for assistance per day now. Everything from natural disasters to hostile alien encounters. It seems word has gotten around the galaxy." Mitchell nodded, looking out at the stars beyond the bridge windows. "Good. Maybe now they'll understand what we've been trying to tell them all along. When death comes calling, sometimes salvation comes from the species that learn to stare death in the face and say, 'Not today.'" The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When you need someone to do the impossible, call the Deathworlders. They were the only ones crazy enough to actually try. Asterisk the END asterisk.